Outro. Turn around. Turn around. Go. 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 Go.
Battle is a harrowing experience. Most soldiers are anxious before it and terrified during it. Its sounds and sights assault the senses, and its stresses can break even the strongest will. Sheer self-interest suggests that it's an experience best avoided, and that a soldier would be well advised to take cover or even to run away. And yet most soldiers do somehow keep going, mastering their fear, coping with the stress, and doing their job. What keeps them in action when so many pressures combine to suggest an urgent appointment elsewhere is that crucial military quality. Hard to define, but easy to identify. We'll call it fighting spirit. Fighting spirit and esprit de corps are part of the tradition of the US Marine Corps, and these young recruits are showing just how these qualities are stimulated. It was this same quality of fighting spirit which enabled another generation of Marines to assault scores of island fortresses in the Pacific, to face a resolute and implacable enemy, to suffer crippling casualties, and to keep going.
Good morning, 1st Battalion. Good morning. Are we ready for some more motivating United States Marine Corps history? Yes. Now, we're going to talk about the Marine Corps going against a very, very powerful army, and that is the German army. And we're going to talk about World War I.
Fighting spirit helped the men on both sides during the First World War to sustain the misery of trench warfare and face the perils of going over the top.
In Belleau Woods, there was 1,200 German soldiers that were dug in. They were ready for anybody to come at them. They had artillery, they had machine guns, and they were prepared for anything. The Marines knew they had to get into Belleau Woods. The German machine gun fire was so intense coming out of this wood line that it was cutting the wheat down just like if someone had a sickle out there. The Marines were dropping left and right. So Dan Daly stands up in this wheat field with his bayoneted rifle over his head, and he says, "Come on, you sons of bitches! You don't want to live forever, do you? Do you understand?"
Yes, sir.
Are you sure?
Yes, sir.
If it is not always that easy to identify fighting spirit, it is all too easy to spot when it disappears.
I could see them coming down the hill, and they were walking in a way that I'd never seen people walk before, like puppets on a stage, as though somebody was jerking them from behind, pulling a string. They did not walk naturally. It was the first time I had ever seen men who had nothing left in them. The colonel came out of his dugout and he said, "Come on, chaps, I'll take you back up there. Follow me. I'll come with you. Don't let the regiment down." But they just took no notice of him at all. They simply went past him.
His reaction often would be to come to me and ask to go to a back corner of the command bunker and just be by himself for a while. And I would hear him sitting back in a corner just sobbing. The pressures were not from so much what the enemy was doing, but its effect on their fellows, the men they'd become close to. I think after you've put the 20th or 25th of your closest friends on a helicopter or in a body bag in a stretcher, it's going to have an effect, particularly when you don't know when it's going to end. Every man, in my opinion, has got some sort of a psychological breaking point under that kind of traumatic pressure.
What is it then that makes one man run away and another stay and fight?
I, Robert Graham Cruiser.
I, Darren King.
I, Anthony Walter Bell.
Swear by Almighty God
that I will be faithful.
That I will be faithful.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Coiffé, au képi, blanc.
This is the first stage of the process. These young men are beginning their military service, whether as soldiers in the French Foreign Legion
and bear true
The British Army,
to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
the Red Army of the Russian Revolution,
in the grade
or as
of
officers
second-
in the United States Army, by taking an oath.
do solemnly swear that I will support and defend
This sort of ceremony, which dates back at least as far as the Sacramentum, the military oath of ancient Rome, is a ritual designed to impress upon participants that they are joining an organization in which their individual instincts and values must be subordinated to the common good, that they are accepting a contract of unlimited liability which may require them to kill or be killed.
I have the privilege to now pronounce you second lieutenants in the United States Army.
But from the outset, the soldier is the product of the society which nurtured him. Deep-seated cultural factors lay behind the appeal of Nazism to the German soldier. German society had long respected the profession of arms and the military virtues of discipline and obedience. A sense of soldierly honor was one of the qualities which helped to make the Germans such formidable fighters.
Unser Führer, Adolf Hitler, sich! Sich!
To me, the greatest thing on earth was Germany. Germany could not be wrong. Deutschland, my Deutschland. And to me, the Führer was something like a second God. How anyone could doubt the Führer. I totally believed that we as a German people were superior and that it more or less was our duty to go into other countries and force our way onto them.
The Japanese soldier, too, owed much of his fearsome reputation to a martial culture which emphasized obedience, the unimportance of the individual, and indifference to pain and discomfort. Unwounded Japanese were rarely taken prisoner. Of the 23,000-strong garrison of Iwo Jima, only 1,000 were captured. On the Japanese-held island of Saipan, even civilians committed suicide rather than face capture. If their position was hopeless, Japanese soldiers would often make a final suicidal charge into enemy fire with a cry of Banzai.
The eeriest thing of the lot was the cries of these young Japanese soldiers before they died, and it was almost a cry of defiance, and the word was Banzai. I'd never heard it before in my life, but it was imprinted on me so much that they were saying thank you to the Emperor for the privilege of allowing them to die for Japan.
Not all cultures place the same emphasis on military values. Even when men enlist to fight for their country, patriotism alone is rarely sufficient to sustain them on their journey into and beyond the firing line.
On behalf of the Commanding General, Major General McMonagle, welcome to Paris Island. Look to your left over there. You see yellow footprints, right?
These young Americans do not necessarily regard dying for their country as the ultimate honor. They may want to be soldiers, but they come from an unmilitary society. To make fighting men of them, therefore, requires a process of comprehensive indoctrination.
Now that you are part of the United States Marine Corps, you are subject to the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Article 86 of this code is unauthorized absence. Anytime you fail to be exactly where you're told to be by either a drill instructor or supervisory personnel, you are subject to this article. Article 92 is disobeying a lawful order. Anytime you fail to do exactly what you are told to do by either a drill instructor or supervisory personnel, you are subject to this article. Now that you are at Paris Island, you will no longer be smoking any cigarettes. You will do exactly what you are told to do to the best of your ability. I want everything out of your pockets empty. Take all your trash and go now. I don't care how you pack it, just get it away. Get rid of that. I want them both emptied out now.
Paris Island, South Carolina, the recruit training depot, boot camp, for the United States Marine Corps. Reception of new recruits takes place between midnight and 4 a.m. The timing is deliberate. It is intended specifically to disorient the new arrivals. From now on, for the next 11 weeks, they will be subjected to a constant barrage of verbal abuse, harassment, and humiliation. Each personality will be quickly destroyed and then rebuilt in the model of the U.S. Marine. The psychological transformation is accompanied by a physical change. Nowadays, recruits to many armies must undergo the rigors of a military haircut. Military fashion has changed in this as in so much else. In the 18th century, for example, the recruit was likely to have to add false hair if his own was not long enough to make it into the military pigtail. But whether the assault on the recruit's hair involves lengthening or shortening, its aim is the same, to impose uniformity of appearance in accordance with the standards of the age.
I offer you the challenge of recruits training, the opportunity to be a United States Marine. Don't stop this. Take charge. Now get your balls on me! There's going to be one thing you learn is that you are going to look at me when I speak. Understand me? Yes, sir! You understand me? Yes, sir! You don't understand.
What it's like the first day is it's pretty hectic. It's for the first 10 minutes, it's usually totally, it's crazy. Privates, they don't know where they're at, and we're not trying to help them to find out where they're at either. We're trying to snap them into this environment as fast as we can do it.
The floor is no longer a floor. Understand me? Yes, sir!
They'll be shaking. Some of them will urinate all over themselves. Some of them will even pass out. They'll start to hyperventilate, and you'll see them. They'll turn all sorts of different shades of white and green, and then he'll raise his hand and he'll say, "Sir, the probably doesn't feel good." Then he'll fall over.
Hurry up! You're not going to pass! Come on! Get it in there! Hurry up! Get back online! You're good! Get online! Get it in there! Keep your eyes off of them! They're not here for your amusement!
You can scare them into wanting to be, a fighting machine, or you can motivate them into want to kill somebody, saying, yes, it's for the good of America. It's for, you're the best fighting force in the United States, or in fact the world. And you can get a private's his mind going, within a couple of minutes. And I've seen privates just, they'll be spitting all over themselves. They're almost crazy with motivation and esprit de corps.
When you arrived, the drill instructor never called you a Marine. You weren't a Marine yet. You were a shithead. And that was the word that was always used. A man is put up in a tree and told, it's an apple tree, and told to throw the apples down. But it's not an apple tree, so he doesn't have it throw down. So the drill instructor says, shithead Smith up there is having problems. Can't throw the apples down. Let's help him by knocking him down with a few stones. So here's this poor bastard up in the train. He's being stoned by everybody in his platoon. And then there were more shocking cases of corporal punishment and clubbing with the butts of rifles. But the psychological plan behind all this is to destroy a man's personality and rebuild it.
By learning to cope with his fear of the instructor and the stress of the training program, the recruit is learning how to face up to the impact of battle. To the Marines, it's a tried and tested method. From these camps, thousands of young men once left for the battlefields of the Pacific, ready to die rather than dishonor the Marine Corps.
proclaim herewith that our Japanese army has occupied this island of Guam by order of the great Emperor of Japan. You, O good citizens, need not worry anything under the regulations of our Japanese authorities. It is for the purpose of restoring liberty and rescuing the whole Asiatic people and creating the permanent peace in Asia.
The island of Guam in the Pacific, 40 years on. Here and on many other islands, the US Marine Corps fought some of the fiercest battles of the Second World War and secured its reputation for indomitable fighting spirit. Almost 500,000 Marines fought in the Pacific War. They suffered nearly 90,000 casualties.
There was always fog and smoke and chaos and a great deal of killing. Your uniform is soaked in blood, great gobs of blood underfoot. It's very slippery. Blood is very slippery. And you are in a state of shock. The Japanese, as I remember them, looked like badly wrapped brown paper parcels. And their eyes were glazed, and I suppose our eyes were glazed too. I cannot really recreate that. It is so beyond the range of normal experience that you really have to take it on faith that I'm coming as close as I can.
Marine units fought on, despite losses which should, in theory, have rendered them ineffective. The 8 square miles of Iwo Jima cost the Marines almost 29,000 men, including 19 battalion commanders. An American admiral paid tribute to their achievement. Uncommon valor, he wrote, was a common virtue.
If you tell a man that he is an extraordinary fighter in an extraordinary organization, he is likely to behave in an extraordinary fashion because this is expected of him. And he's not going to let the side down. He's not going to be the first Marine to run, which he believes he would be. It's not true. At Bull Run in 1862, the Marines broke and fled, but he has never been told that. After the Battle of Sugarloaf Hill, my regiment had taken over 80% casualties. We were marching toward the landing behind Naha, and someone started whistling the Marine hymn. And suddenly the whole regiment was whistling the Marine hymn. We had every reason to be disillusioned and to be disgusted by all the costume, jewelry, and phraseology of war. But we still whistled the Marine hymn.
Une poitrine. Une poitrine. Une poitrine.
A common culture, a similar background, helps an army turn its recruits into fighting soldiers.
Qu'est-ce que c'est?
But the training process can work on men who have nothing in common.
Plus fort. Plus fort. Répète. Plus fort. Plus fort. C'est une tête. C'est une tête. Qu'est-ce que c'est? Oh. C'est une oreille.
All these men have in common is that they have run away from something. Yet in 16 weeks, the French Foreign Legion will turn them into soldiers whose fighting spirit is second to none. They start by giving them a common language.
Sur position 1, coupe par coupe.
These legionnaires must learn to master the tools of their trade. In this instance, the Saint-Étienne automatic rifle. But this training has a broader purpose than simply imparting a technical skill. There's far more to the forging of fighting spirit than simply teaching a man how to fire a rifle or drive a tank. So alongside this sort of training, goes the process of fusing together individuals into a team. Drill is a classic example of an activity which helps bond soldiers and instills instinctive obedience. It once had vital practical functions. Constant repetition of basic drill movements ensured that the soldier could load and fire his weapon and stay in formation in the din and confusion of battle. It took weeks to become proficient in the handling of the flintlock musket. These French soldiers of the Napoleonic period, in common with their allies and opponents, spent hours on the drill square learning their trade. Proficiency in drill gave soldiers a real advantage on the battlefields of the horse and musket era. They could fire faster and move more efficiently than their opponents, and they were less likely to crumble under the impact of a close-range firefight. The drill which we see being executed here today is itself a survival of the drill carried out as training for combat on the battlefields of the 18th and 19th centuries. But in the warfare of the 20th century, such skills are an irrelevant anachronism, seemingly pointless. So why do it? Well, there are two reasons. First, it's a simple but proven way of instilling absolute obedience, of guaranteeing that the soldier will do what he's told instinctively, however difficult or dangerous the circumstances, without considering the consequences for his personal safety. But second and more important, it is the time-honored way of welding men together, of submerging the identity of the individual in that of the group.
Molding a recruit who is a well-disciplined, responsible individual requires an effective and rigorous training program. We feel that our program at Parris Island meets that test. It is a very demanding and difficult experience, for you see, we have designed it to be that way. We believe that the man who has proven himself through strenuous training is also the man who is most likely to cope with the extremes of combat.
The training program gets out of the soldier exactly what it puts in: an abiding respect for discipline.
It's taught me a lot of discipline. It's taught me a lot of self-respect, a lot of respect for my superiors and my elders. It's changed my whole way of life.
You come from civilian life, and you come from undisciplined society, and you come in here, and they train you to become disciplined, become a more disciplined person.
A crucial element in the creation of fighting spirit is discipline. And in every army, that discipline is backed up by the sanction of punishment. For much of history, those punishments tended to be brutal. Flogging was a frequent occurrence in the British Army of the 18th and 19th centuries. This cat of nine tails, preserved here at Sandhurst, was last used on the 28th of June, 1850, on Private Charles Lacey of the Coldstream Guards. You can still see the bloodstains. Private Lacey was charged with being absent without leave, with using abusive and threatening language to his superior officer, and with refusing in a very improper manner to do a punishment awarded by his commanding officer. For these offences, he received 6 months with hard labour and 50 lashes. The procedure was ruthless. The offender was spread-eagled against a triangle of pikes, the hands lashed together at the top, the feet one at each corner. The flogging was then carried out in front of the assembled troops and in the presence of a doctor. The doctor's responsibility was to ensure that the man didn't die during punishment. Private Lacey was comparatively lucky. He received only 50 lashes. For those whose sentences did not include hard labor, the average was 150, and the maximum, almost unbelievably, was 600. The purpose of military discipline is simple enough: to force men to endure the rigors of campaigning and the stress of battle. Frederick the Great believed that his soldiers would only fight if they were more frightened of their own officers than they were of the enemy. So his army enforced its discipline with a wide range of cruel punishments. A common penalty was running the gauntlet, when the offender had to walk, stripped to the waist, between two ranks of soldiers who lashed him as he passed. Punishment has naturally tended to be harsher at the front than in barracks. During World War I, the British Army still resorted to the degrading procedure known as Field Punishment Number 1.
I've had a court-martial for letting a round off on parade. And I had 10 days number 1 field punishment, and that was tied up against a wagon wheel, where they tied your ankles at the bottom and your wrists up above. We had your wrists crossed, and that was for 10 days, an hour in the morning and an hour in the afternoon. All the while you're tied there, you can feel yourself getting colder and colder. Feel as if you're sort of sinking all the time. You know, funny sensation. Shellfire was coming over all the time because they knew where you was billeted, sort of thing. And you often get the shells fall there.
Cowardice and desertion are fatal to an army's fighting spirit. They have consequently attracted the ultimate punishment, death. During the First World War, the British Army executed 346 soldiers, 266 of them for desertion.
Firing party, unload.
The firing party, men from the prisoners' unit, sometimes quailed at what one veteran called their intolerable obligation and failed to kill the victim outright, forcing the officer to administer the coup de grace with his revolver. The Germans made widespread use of the death penalty at the end of the Second World War. Allied soldiers often found the results of flying court-martial teams whose victims were hanged, usually bearing a placard with the words, "So die all traitors to the fatherland." The severity of punishment, official or unofficial, varies very much from army to army.
I was arrested for being drunk and asleep, I think a combination of both, on guard duty, and given 15 days in the stockade. The first thing that happened was I got a beating up from the RSM. The tradition is you stand to attention and you get beaten up, and then when you fall on the ground you stand again and you look the guy in the eye and you know he won't hit you standing attention, and sure enough he does. So by the time you've had a bit of that, you're quite well squared off around here. And then you go to the barber shop, you're shaved, head shaved, bald, and then I was given a sack of rocks with metal shoulder straps instead of the ordinary shoulder straps, and began what is called the plot, where you run in a circle, and a sergeant stands over you with a whistle, and he blows one blast of the whistle, you do a forward roll, 2 blasts, you march at knees bend, and 3 blasts, you crawl. And you've got on your bald head, you have a metal helmet without the inside of the hat, so it's metal on skull. And you do that for a couple of hours, and that's the introduction to the stockade.
Répétez après moi. Les oies sauvages vers le nord. Leur cri dans la nuit monte.
Discipline in the Foreign Legion may have acquired a certain notoriety, but a harsh discipline is not enough to create fighting spirit. Fear of punishment may stop a man running away, but it will not make him brave. A soldier fights better when he has a group to identify with. So armies take pains to foster pride in that group.
Légionnaire Padillo, Première Compagnie, 2 mois de service.
Mon colonel, la première fois que tu as fait le 8 km, tu as mis quel temps?
Je n'ai pas compris la question, mon colonel.
Legionnaire Murray, 2 mois de service. Première Compagnie, section de Sergeant Chef Minichi, à vos ordres, mon colonel.
C'est la première fois que tu prends la garde?
Oui, mon colonel.
They've read about the Legion, they've heard about the Legion, and the reputation of the Legion is as a fighting force. When you arrive there in basic training, you are, apart from learning the disciplines of being a soldier, how to handle a gun and so on, you are soaked up in the traditions of the Legion. They give you all the history, they tell you about their famous battles. You are brainwashed, it's a bit strong, but it's that sort of process. There's a lot of singing, military songs. By the time you've been in the Legion, 6 months' time, you think you're the best thing that ever happened, and the greatest fighting force that ever happened, and off you go.
On Camarón Day, Legion tradition is celebrated with the greatest pomp. Camarón, in Mexico, was the setting for one of the Legion's many heroic last stands, a fight to the finish by a tiny band of Legionnaires against overwhelming odds. In the casket, carried by a veteran in a wheelchair, is a sacred relic, the wooden hand of the detachment's commander, Captain d'Anjou. An officer reads the account, known to all present, of how the last few faced death.
Les 60 hommes du capitaine d'Anjou ont tenu jusqu'au bout leur serment. Pendant 11 heures, ils ont résisté à 2000 ennemis. En ont tué 300 et blessé autant. Ils ont, par leur sacrifice, en sauvant le convoi, rempli la mission qui leur avait été confiée.
The wooden hand of Captain d'Anjou is still preserved at the headquarters of the French Foreign Legion in the south of France. It's a reminder to the legionnaires of today of the traditions and the standards of their unit. For there can have been few more shining examples of that fighting spirit than Captain d'Anjou's last stand with his men at Camarón. Most of his men weren't even French. They could have had little enough understanding of the complexities of French foreign policy. But they were tough professionals. They had a strong group identity, great cohesion, and robust morale. They were hopelessly outnumbered, and they must have known that to fight on would mean only death. But for most of them was the risk even greater, and that was the risk of not living up to the standards of that unit. So, fight on they did, to death. the British soldier finds his spiritual home within the regiment. In the regimental system, the esprit de corps of the modern unit draws strength from the fighting spirit shown by its ancestors. The regiment's colours, decorated with battle honours, symbolise its ancient and honourable traditions. In the days of close-range battle, colours served as rallying points. Indeed, the custom of trooping the colour along a regiment's ranks dates from those days when it was essential that men recognised their own regiment's colours in action. These officers of the Queen's Regiment are dining with their colours proudly displayed. To allow them to be captured was deemed a great disgrace, and men risked their lives to defend them. In May 1811, the British 3rd Foot, the Buffs, now part of this regiment, was caught in line by French cavalry at the Battle of Albuera. The massive silver centrepiece commemorates the incident. Both the ensigns carrying the colours were cut down, and one of the colours was taken. The other was seized as it fell by Lieutenant Latham. A sword cut from a cavalryman took off part of his face, and another severed his arm, but he held on to the colour with his remaining hand, and despite his injuries, saved it for the regiment.
The Queen.
Other ornaments and relics help add to the regiment's self-esteem, and its individuality is reinforced by a strong fabric of tradition.
The Queen.
There are the formal occasions, the ceremonies, the special rituals unique to its membership. These officers, by regimental tradition, drink the loyal toast individually while remaining seated. But above all, there is that special sense of belonging, which comes from the wearing of uniform. Uniform plays an important part in the creation of fighting spirit. Modern combat kit is chiefly practical, and it's intended to make its wearer as inconspicuous as possible on the battlefield. But even this somber and shapeless garb has symbolic functions. For these Sandhurst cadets, its issue typifies the process of turning a man into a soldier, and its very uniformity sums up the way in which individual values are subordinated to group loyalties. For formal and ceremonial occasions, there are more elaborate uniforms. These have greater symbolism. Their insignia of rank define the steps of the military hierarchy, and their buttons and badges denote specific regiment and corps. These cadets are being fitted with the mess kit that they'll wear when they join their regiments. All these things stimulate a soldier's pride in his unit and in himself, and they help to create that indefinable ingredient that holds an army together: fighting spirit. In the days when battles were fought at close range, uniform provided a means of recognizing not only one's own side and the units within it, but also of stimulating the wearer's soldierly pride and confidence. The 18th century theorist, the Comte de Guibert, wrote, "Personal bravery of a single individual does not decide on the day of battle, but the bravery of the unit. The exterior splendor, the regularity of movements, the adroitness and at the same time firmness of the mass. All this gives the individual soldier the safe and calming conviction that nothing can withstand his particular regiment or battalion." The glories of the past are summoned up to encourage the soldiers of the present. These men of the Gloucestershire Regiment carry their own unique regimental distinction. Not only do they wear a badge at the front of their caps, but they also have another tiny badge at the back. This tiny back badge commemorates the Battle of Alexandria in 1801, when the regiment faced both ways to repel an attack from front and rear. 14 years later at Waterloo, when the regiment's square was wavering, it was rallied by a shout of 28th, remember Egypt. Now, few of the soldiers present had actually been at Alexandria, but they held fast. They had remembered their regiment. The same regiment fought doggedly nearly a century and a half later on the Imjin River in Korea. Their cap badge still reminded its soldiers of their distinguished forefathers. There was a strong family feeling within the regiment. It had a reputation and a tradition to keep up.
The regimental spirit had an effect. There was a consciousness that that regiment had been in service, in spite of disasters in its history, such as at Salamanca, for example, with enormous casualties, without a single day's break since the latter part of the 18th century. And that it had had its ups and downs, but it had always attempted to do its duty and had done it on the whole well. There was the dependence on one another. We all knew one another. And by and large, people did not want to let comrades down.
It's the traditions of the regiment that forge these bonds of comradeship. This is an inter-company boxing match for the men of the 2nd Battalion, the Queen's Regiment, on active service in Northern Ireland. Most of the men here will remain with their regiment for the whole of their service. In ways like this, fighting spirit is reinforced by a unique kind of rivalry. Each soldier believes himself to be in the best platoon, of the best company, of the best battalion, of the best regiment in the army.
And I believe that we have seen examples of the very best type of fighting spirit. We've seen the will to carry on when the legs are beginning to turn to rubber, and indeed a significant amount of grit. Last night, Private Rooney, as you've heard, was shot by the IRA. Before he got carted off to hospital, I was talking to him, and his principal concern was whether or not C Company were actually going to be able to find a reserve to take his place.
Regimental identity makes its own unique contribution to soldiers' morale, but it is the intimate relationship between the members of the small unit which lies at the very heart of fighting spirit. Throughout history, armies have tended to make the smallest brick of their organization a group of no more than 10 men who could get to know each other well. This 4-man team patrolling Derry keeps going because each soldier in it knows his comrades, trusts them, and knows that they rely on him. The infantry section, or the crew of the armored vehicle, are the men at the cutting edge of war, and it is their efforts that decide the outcome of battles. Fighting spirit may start with patriotic enthusiasm and rigorous training and be shored up by discipline, but it is comradeship that really matters. Mates, buddies, kameraden, copain. Most languages have a special word for a soldier's comrades, for whom his affection, forged in the heat of training and tried in the crucible of battle, will be, quite literally, passing the love of women. The ties of comradeship, far more than the threat of punishment or the lure of reward, enable soldiers to withstand the stresses and strains that are an inevitable part of their profession.
Come on, you're almost there.
Today's Marine recruits are taught, above all, never to let their comrades down.
Get up,
Yesterday's recruits remember why.
And that's how we lived, and that's why we loved and respected each other. We prayed for each other. I was as close to some of these people as I am to my own brothers. We bore the same pain and the same suffering.
It's your friends that keep you from turning tail and running. It's your friends that force you out the door when you don't think you should go.
I had been wounded, a gunshot wound above the right knee, a flesh wound, $1 million. I was honorably out of it in a warm, safe, dry field hospital. And then I heard that my regiment was going to jump off and land behind enemy lines. And so I jumped hospital illegally, hitchhiked to the front, and rejoined my regiment. And the second day after the landing, I was critically wounded. But why did I go back? I went back to be with the men. You need the others. You need your friends. And that is essentially what men fight for. Not the flag, not for glory, not for the Marine Corps, but for one another. And the men beside you have saved your life at times, and you saved theirs. And you're not going to let each other down. So this binds you together, and together you go into battle.
This is what keeps a soldier going. His fighting spirit is displayed to his friends and on behalf of his friends in a private world where the respect of one soldier for another means everything. Soldiers do not fight for political slogans, nor just for their unit's reputation. They fight for one another.